that, it looks like.
Okay, John, thank you. On days like this, it's great to speak to someone who knows a little bit about constitutional law. Joining us is Michael Dougan from the University of Liverpool, and he fulfills that criteria for us. Hello to you, Michael. It's good to see you again. Thanks for joining us. Where does this leave the government?
Well, it leaves the government on the end of a very, very significant defeat, I think. Obviously, in terms of the outcome of the case, but also I think in terms of the tone of the judgment as well that we've seen from the High Court today. The Secretary of State's arguments were described by the judges as being flawed in a very basic sense. So it really is quite a strong judgment that the government's on the losing end of here. I suppose what the case is ultimately about is a clash of different sort of visions of the Constitution. And perhaps one thing that will console the government today as they appeal on to the Supreme Court is that in a previous case in Northern Ireland in the High Court last week, they did actually win. And the High Court in Northern Ireland was much more receptive to the government's argument about this being about the appropriate balance of power between Parliament acting at the domestic level and the government acting on the international level. So perhaps as they take the appeal forward to the Supreme Court, they'll look to rely on the sort of the arguments that they made in the Northern Irish Court, which did at least find favour there.
Yeah, but if you get to the Supreme Court and they still rule against you, they're in a lot of trouble then, aren't they?
That's right indeed. And it really changes potentially the dynamics of Parliament's involvement in the Brexit process quite significantly, because we move away from just Parliament being involved in scrutinising the government's negotiations and its position as it tries to negotiate a withdrawal from the European Union after Article 50 is triggered potentially in March, to effectively Parliament being given the authority to take that decision itself about whether we should leave the European Union at all. And that will raise a whole different set of arguments again that we visited in quite a divisive referendum campaign, and Parliament will be absolutely at the centre of that, and deciding exactly what weight or authority they attribute to the referendum vote will be a very contentious matter indeed.
Okay, so whatever happens, even if the government win on appeal, this process is delayed now, is it, or not necessarily?
It's not entirely clear. I mean, there are different ways that the government could try and engage with what the High Court has said today. So in your clip before, it was mentioned that there might be a one-line Act of Parliament or a one-line bill rushed through to try and provide the necessary authority. Obviously, that's going to limit the kind of scrutiny that Parliament can take in relation to this development, and it'll be interesting to see if the House of Commons in particular would let that go forward. There are a different set of issues as well, of course, with the House of Lords, whereas the Commons is representative and may feel more directly bound by the referendum result. The House of Lords is known to be much more strongly pro-European Union, and that may present a real sticking point for the government as they try and sort of progress legislation to authorise the Article 50 trigger through. So there could be delays, although, as we said before, the government does, at the moment at least, seem to think it can bring the Article 50 forward at the end of March.
And if we bring this down to its basic level, this is unelected judges deciding their view on the will of the people.
Perhaps so. I mean, it's certainly the courts wading in a very bold fashion to one of the most controversial political debates that we've seen, and the High Court judgment is quite surprising in that it is very stark and strong in its criticism of the government's argument. So it'll be interesting to see what sort of tack the Supreme Court takes on appeal there, whether sort of the political aspects of the case influence their judgment at all, or influence the way that they respond to the different arguments that the claimants and the government are going to present at that point.
Okay, great to talk to you. Thank you.
Thanks very much indeed.
Time for a look now at some of the day's other main stories we hear on Sky.